What's up, guys? It's Casual King MMA. Today we're going to look at the pay-per-view problem. That's just what I'm dubbing it. The pay-per-view problem is the lowering buy rate, the increasing prices of pay-per-views, less names, just the overall decline of combat sports at the highest levels. The casual scene has been watching far more. It's far more recognized sport, but hardcore fans are suffering. And this brings me back to when I was a casual fan. My very first pay per view, Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. Not a great fight, but the hype, the superstars, the names behind it. I mean, I was at soccer practice and you would hear friends betting on the fight. It was just a spectacle more than an actual fight. A huge fight, sold more than you can even imagine or you want to think about. Conor lost his mind because he got all the money in the world. But this is something you don't see anymore. When you're thinking about the biggest pay per views in recent years, the biggest one wasn't even a pay per view. It was Jake Paul against Mike Tyson. A little bit telling that the biggest combat sports event of the last of the 2020s was a 60-plus-year-old retired boxer against a YouTube sensation who was taking up boxing. Not ideal. This image reinforces the idea that boxing is dead. Dana White famously said that they were going to produce no new stars, and it's come true. But it's interesting. Okay, why would the biggest fight be on streaming? It got over 108 million people watching. That's interesting that Netflix would do that deal as well. But let's move to the UFC. Okay, well, boxing has a star problem. Does UFC have a star problem? Yes. Yes, it does. UFC's biggest star was a close to retiring kickboxer who just lost the belt. Alex does not have many fights left, and the UFC is running out of star potential. The Sugar Show just ended. Probably not going to beat Rob again. Alex is gone. John Jones, at most, has one fight left against Tom Aspinall, but I doubt that happens. The UFC is running out of stars, but the brand is better than ever. I think that's an interesting dichotomy, and I think the reason that this is okay is because the UFC brand is now bigger than the fighters. Conor McGregor helped elevate the UFC brand into the stratosphere, into being a recognizable American and worldwide sport. But what has changed is there's no Conor McGregors anymore. And I think that's okay. Conor outgrew the UFC. He's getting into politics. He's become separate, but the UFC is okay with that. There's always going to be a new kid who wants to fight, who wants to become champion. The UFC is never going to have a problem of talent. They've spent a lot of money on talent with UFC PIs around the world because making a star in one country helps turn that country on to MMA. But UFC is on the right track for that. They got a lot of foreign talent, but they are struggling in the American market. Pay-per-views are down, prices are up, cards feel weaker. Why would you spend that kind of money? Introducing the solution, Netflix. I think that Netflix, trying to get into the combat sport and sports industry as a whole, throwing money out the door with the Christmas football games, as well as the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight, makes me think that they want to make their own They want to make their own sports streaming brand, and I think the UFC would be very happy on that sports streaming brand. They would be the first big sport there. The UFC would get the eyes, they get the attention, but it would be a different product because Netflix cares about viewership. Netflix doesn't care as much about the pay-per-view model. Netflix doesn't believe in the pay-per-view model, which is very nice to hear. What Netflix believes in is they believe in getting people to subscribe, getting people to sign up. And if you have people signing up, they'll stay with you. And this model works. Very few people, once they get a subscription, cancel it. That is what Netflix is relying on. And the UFC was the king of that. Throwback fight, Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso, not that far throwback. It was a female title fight on Mexican Independence Day. Free. Because it was free female title fight, Mexican Independence Day, pretty solid card. 3 million people signed up for ESPN. Not 3 million people watched it. 3 million people went to their wallet, put out their credit card, and signed up for an ESPN membership that had never had an ESPN membership before just to watch that fight. That is exactly what Netflix wants. And Netflix is big enough where they're going to be able to help the UFC with this transition because the UFC has to transition. People cannot shell out $80. the what the new system will look like can be a few things. One of the ideas I have is to kind of get rid of the pay-per-view model in general, where there's no longer really a big difference between fight nights, Apex cards, and pay-per-views. You get rid of the Apex entirely. You only have crowded venues, and all the crowded venue events are good. Or maybe you keep the Apex, and the Apex is the fight night, and then if there's a crowd, it's basically a pay-per-view, but it's free. I like that idea, stacking cards. The cards would be spread out better, the talent would be spread out better, which would be nice. It'd be a better consistent viewing experience, but you wouldn't get the hype of Bruce Buffer, it's time with those pay-per-views. So I get there's downsides to it. But the idea is that it costs right now, it costs it costs over $1,000 to be a UFC fan right now on ESPN. That has to change. That price has got to get down to like $400 or $500. It's got to be in line with other sports. It being year round is a big bonus. The UFC is so easy to add into your viewing sports schedule. You just add it in with everything. The events being on Saturdays, it's great with football. It's just a little extra. And I know people want more sports. They want more fights. Put it on Netflix. Make it cheap. Maybe to keep the pay-per-view model, the regular fights are fee, and there's an additional fee for pay-per-views. We're talking $20, $40. We're not talking $80. The prices go down, more fans get invested. More fans get invested, the sport grows, and that is the ultimate goal. You get more fans, you get more people signing up for Netflix, you get more people buying merch, you get more people willing to spend money on tickets to go to your events. Grow the brand, make the brand cheaper to get into. There's a lot of sports, the buying costs are too great. Like skiing, very expensive to get into. Ice skating, not everyone can get into it. It's a little expensive it's a kind of expensive to become a UFC fighter. Training, gyms aren't cheap, equipment's not cheap. It's very expensive to get a UFC fan. Lower the price of both as much as you can, and you will have a top 3 biggest sport in the world. Thank you for your time, guys. Peace.